I had my summer job, loved it. I was like, wow, that's really interesting. And then my first semester, sophomore year, I'm taking an entrepreneurial management class. We have a guest speaker, and the guy comes in and he says, I was sitting right where you guys are all sitting, and I was sitting there 20 years ago. And I wanted nothing more than to be an investment banker. And I know probably most of you want that too. But let me tell you something. I sell dog food for a living, and I'm the happiest guy I know.
Win all in, play my cards right. Up the ante, one blackjack all night. Roll the dice, let it ride. Water the odds, I got snake eyes.
Entrepreneur Perspectives is produced by Quiet Loud Studios, a production company and content network. Learn more at quietloudstudios.com. I have to tell you, Bob, this book, I don't know how you thought about it when you started writing the book. Obviously, it's for commercial real estate. It's for people in the business. I think it's for any industry. It's inspired me, like just reading about prospecting and you showing up, like you're everywhere.
Right.
You're on all these podcasts, like a podcast dynamo. Like I can learn so much about you. Obviously, we work together, so I've learned a lot about you before that. But you get to other layers of it through podcasting and through long form conversation. And just seeing how you were doing things in the 80s and ongoing and going through all the different. I think the book's really great for honestly anybody in any industry, but like anyway, going back to that original thought I had, like when you were writing this book, obviously for commercial real estate, were you thinking about it for anybody?
Yeah. Well, Eric, great to be on with you. And I'll tell you, the book is kind of an outcropping of a piece I did. I was asked by a Columbia grad school to do a talk to their students on the lessons I learned running and operating Massey Knakal. And it was interesting in that I came up with 26 lessons at the time. I since turned that into what I call Knakal Nuggets. And I have 100 of these things because I've expanded it since then. And the thing that struck me when I finished and I finally got to the 100, I started looking at them and I said, you know what? These all pertain to a real estate salesperson, but like 80% of them pertain to any sales business. And 40 to 50% of them are kind of just like general life lessons. And it was interesting how broad I think the applicability is of the different things that you kind of learn. And, the way you behave, the way you interact with people, things like that, that's way beyond being a real estate broker. It's beyond being a salesperson. It's how you live life. And so I thought it was really interesting. And so the book kind of was meant to kind of do two things, kind of take you on the journey of my story as a broker, but also kind of like textbook light, that here's the stuff that we did, here's why we did it, here's what worked well, here's what didn't work well, here were the good things that happened, here were the mistakes we made. And I think that, you can learn a lot from that. It's one of the big mistakes Paul and I made when we started Massey Knakal, is that, we didn't reach out to senior people and ask for advice. We did everything by trial and error. And so consequently, we made hundreds, if not thousands of mistakes. Fortunately, we didn't make a lot of them twice, but, lots and lots of mistakes. And I think had we reached out to folks with more experience, we would have been able to avoid a lot of those. So part of this was kind of a retrospective on my career. Part of it was trying to share the stories, some of which are humorous, some of which are insightful, some of which are embarrassing, and to teach people to be a little bit of that guide for them, like the guide that I didn't have earlier in my career that forced me to make so many mistakes that, maybe folks who read the book can avoid making some of the mistakes that I made as a young broker.
It's almost like the book you never had, perhaps. I remember reading early on when I was starting my business, the Amazon book, one of Bezos. I don't know if it wasn't his book, it was a story about it and how they had to run across the street to the bank to keep the line of credit open or they were going to lose their company, right? And you talked about, okay, the line of credit's going, we have to talk to the bank and we have to negotiate with them in order to stay in business and keep that open. You could talk about that, but also just, was there even time for you to reflect and to read these books? Because there's obviously books out there where you can learn from it, but you don't have the same kind of Q&A you can do with it. And now throw in AI and you can really actually have Q&A almost with the author in a way. When I say that, like, what's coming to mind for you?
Yeah, well, it's interesting you bring that up. And I haven't really talked about this on podcasts, but at the beginning of my career, we were so busy just trying to set up a system and make calls and meet people and do the working in the business that we didn't really take time to work on the business. And I think those are two very, very different things. And, part of working on the business is learning and reading books and talking to people and figuring out the different strategies and tactics that should be implemented. And I think as I got further into my career, I actually have become more and more curious about
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
And when you're curious, that's when you read because you want to learn and you want to figure out, hey, I'm doing it this way, but that's probably not the only way to do it. Maybe somebody could do it better. And so I started to read probably, it was a good 5, 6, 7 years into my career before I started reading a lot of these books. I love reading, and I really think that there should be a whole college curriculum on likability and salesmanship and building relationships and human behavior, persuasion, all kinds of things like that, that if you are in an industry where you're dealing with people, those skills are so much more important than knowing whether prepaid rent is a debit or a credit on a balance sheet if you're an accountant, right?
Right.
So I think that I was really taken with some of the stuff I had read. I remember reading early on the Harvey Mackay books, Swim with the Sharks, Dale Carnegie, the stuff that Winning Friends and Influencing People, things like that, where it occurred to me early on that all I do all day long is try to get a switch inside somebody's head to go to either yes or no. And there are a million things that go into that. Firstly, putting yourself in a position to be able to try to influence which way the switch goes. So it was a course where I really became very, very curious about the how, what, and why of everything. And that's what led me to read. And, on my personal website, bobknakal.com, I have a suggested reading list with a lot of these great books that I've read that have taught me so much and helped shape the way I approach my day-to-day work.
Yeah, the Dale Carnegie book, I don't know what it was. There was something about the title that early on, it like kind of turned me off to it. I didn't understand it. And then I read it and I was like, oh my gosh. And then I found out that my grandfather, who's long since passed, it was one of his favorite books and he had an original copy of it. So like rereading it on there, it's just, and they don't teach it in college. I don't know. I guess you go read that book. Is that what you would tell someone who's young today? Like read that book and go and find mentors, right?
Yeah, until I'm very, very busy with my new firm now, which is 16 months old. But at some point in the future, I want to design a curriculum and teach a course, as I just described, which I think would be so beneficial to so many people. I think it's a donut hole in college curriculum that needs to be filled.
Yeah. You went to Wharton, obviously a really good school. You mentioned how there was aspects of college that really helped you out and you didn't talk negatively or you didn't go into too many details about it. Obviously there's a bigger book there, but like as you think back today and college is a big topic of conversation. And when you went to college, it wasn't that long ago, right? But college wasn't the cost that it is today and things have changed drastically. You have kids, right? Like what are your perspectives on college as you think about it?
Yeah, look, I think that very, very broadly, I think that college isn't nearly as important as it used to be. I interview people. I ask where they went to college only out of curiosity, but really doesn't matter to me whether they went to Harvard or they dropped out of high school. They have a great personality and can do this business well. I'll give you two examples. We hired one year in the early 90s, we hired a kid who was the valedictorian at Harvard. And he was terrible as a salesperson and flamed out in about 9 months. I mean, he felt that the brokerage business was beneath him. And then we had one of our salespeople barely got out of high school and never graduated college. And he was $1 million producer every year and a great salesman and just had an incredibly engaging personality. You talk to this guy for 15 minutes, feel like you were his lifelong best friend. And that's so much more valuable in sales than where you went to school or the quality of the formal education that you had. That's why I think learning likability, learning to ask probing questions to find out something that you have in common with somebody, which could be the basis of a strong relationship. So many things that are so fundamentally simple, but are not really taught. And if you're not taught those things, it may not occur to you.
Yeah, because sometimes people have it, right? They have the gift of gab and they can just get into a room. And next thing you know, like you said, they have this likability to them. It seems like if someone was open to it and they didn't see it as beneath them, that there's that potential, right? Where you could train them and help them out to understand that if they can just be around it, be in the room, and they would pick it up over time. You've seen that play out?
Yeah, and I think it can be taught. It's not something, yes, if you have that personality naturally. Like two of our best salespeople were not the valedictorian at their colleges, but Tommy Donovan and Jimmy Ventura were two guys who just had the most infectious personalities. These guys will walk into a room, the room lights up, and they're both unbelievably great salespeople. And I think if you have it naturally, you're so lucky. But it absolutely can be taught.
Yeah. What about if you think about kids today and they're going through this process of, I think you went to go at Payne Weber, right? You went for an interview at Payne Weber and you walk across and then you see like, wait, there's this commercial real estate firm. I don't even know what this is. What is that? Go apply for a job. And then it happens, right? But there's this perception. It's like the sexy business. I want to be an investment banker. I want private equity. I want all that type of thing. Yeah, like that's a common thing you see today. Like you see kids in college and they want to get the internship at the big firm, but they'd even think about what else might be out there, right? They're on this path and the path switched just like that.
Yeah, that's my first lesson of the 26 that I originally put together for that Columbia speech was keep an open mind and think outside the box. And you're absolutely right. You must have heard that story somewhere, but I was coming out of a Payne Weber office after dropping off a resume. And across the hall, I saw Coldwell Banker, a huge sign. I thought the place was a bank. It's 1981. I'm a freshman at Wharton. I want to be the next Gordon Gekko like every other Wharton kid. Because I thought, hey, I make a lot of money doing that. But in those days, investment banks and commercial banks weren't hiring college kids for the summer. CB was the only place that offered me a summer job. Took it, loved it. Still wasn't quite sold. And I don't tell this part of the story too often, but I had my summer job, loved it. I was like, wow, that's really interesting. And then my first semester, sophomore year, I'm taking an entrepreneurial management class. We have a guest speaker, and the guy comes in and he says, I was sitting right where you guys are all sitting, and I was sitting there 20 years ago. And I wanted nothing more than to be an investment banker, and I know probably most of you want that too. But let me tell you something. I sell dog food for a living, and I'm the happiest guy I know. And he was in the pet supply business, and he said, do something, figure out what you love, and do that. And if you want to be in business, if you can find something you love, you're going to get to the top of that business. And you get to the top of any kind of business in the business world, you're going to make a lot of money. So don't do something because you think you make a lot of money. Do something you love. And it hit me right then. I said, you know what? I really like this real estate stuff. Forget about Wall Street. I'm going to do real estate. And I went back to that position my next 2 summers and then started with CB in Manhattan when I got out of school. And it was a mistake. I stumbled into it. I feel so blessed that that happened for me because now I have a job that's a job and a hobby. And I truly love what I do.
Yeah, you get to tell stories about it. I know someone who actually walked into Granite Bank thinking they were selling granite countertops, and it turned out it was actually a bank, right? So it's a similar story of different outcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you get to tell stories, right? And like I talked about before, you're on all these different podcasts. You talk about it in your book a lot, and obviously it's meaningful. You wouldn't spend an evening and afternoon with someone like myself and sharing these stories, but you understand the impact it has. I would say it's obviously changed a lot. The election changed a lot in 2024. A lot of people are showing up on podcasts like, wait, what's going on here? But you were doing this before and you've been doing this for a long time. You're just changing with the times. So like, what's the medium? Where do I need to show up to? Right? Is it having signs outside my building to say, hey, we sell this? Is it, sending out newsletters? Is it appearing on podcasts and YouTube videos? Right? Like, that's weird. And I think a lot of people have a hard time with that. I say, well, why would I do that? What's the return on investment if I go and spend an hour doing this? Like, how many leads did we get? How much business did we generate? Like, what would you tell those people?
Yeah, well, Eric, it is ROI. You're right about that, but it's return on involvement, not return on investment. So what's the return on your involvement in a certain activity? And I think whether it's being on podcasts or public speaking or being on TV or making calls, that's called market presence. Market presence is important because if you follow me on social media, you know that I quite often say it's not who you know, it's who knows you. And I say that because in the New York City real estate market, there are 176,000 investment properties in the four boroughs. There are about 250 owners of those properties. I make a lot of calls every day, but I can't call 250,000 people. So I need some people to know who I am and reach out to me. So we've always been very conscious of that. And, we were creating content before content creation was even a great.
Right.
We were doing newsletters back in the 80s, and we're doing market reports and all kinds of things. In the Massey Knakal days, before email really became popular, we were sending out 3 million pieces of mail a year. And, we sold the company over 10 years ago. People still remember getting all that mail. It was such a market presence thing. It was great. So we focused on making calls. That's the number one revenue generating activity a broker can do. But we send text blasts, email blasts, still do hard mail. I speak in public a lot. I go to networking events. I try to hit 261 networking events a year. I do podcasts. I've done over 100 podcasts because you never know where someone is going to hear something that resonates with them and reach out to you. And there's a huge misconception about the benefit or why you do this. People who are ignorant will think, oh, Knakal just is an egomaniac. He wants to be out there. He thinks he's a hot shot going on Fox Business or CNBC or doing this podcast. It's just all about him. It couldn't be further from the truth. Those people just don't get it. What I'm doing is trying to put myself in a position to get in the way of some kind of information that's going to help one of my clients. So I'm doing this podcast with you right now. Maybe somebody's a listener of your podcast that never heard of me, doesn't know me, but maybe they will pay more for one of the properties I'm selling than anybody else. Or maybe they know somebody that will pay more for a property than anybody else, one of my properties. Or maybe they have some kind of a technique or intelligence or method or tactic or strategy or software or something that's going to help me help my client get a better price. And so it's not all about me. It's all about the client. If my clients aren't happy, I'm out of business. I'm trying to do anything and everything possible to get the best possible outcome for my client. And if that means spending time with you on this podcast in the hopes that somebody might listen to what I'm saying right now and say, hey, you know what? I like that guy. I'm going to call him and maybe he knows my friend or maybe my friend can help him. And you just never know where things are going to come from. And I will tell you, I've been shocked. I became active on social media in January of 2023. I originally thought it was such a waste of time. I am directly getting business now from people who said, hey, I saw that post you did about that deal at 123 Main Street, and I have a property just like that. Could you sell it for me? I had somebody call me up, say, hey, Bob, I'm not a real estate person. My dad owned a development site in Manhattan. He passed away. And I went into Perplexity AI to say, who's the best development site broker in New York City? And he said, all I saw was your name on the first 3 pages of this website. And so I want you to sell my property. That's a $50 million development site. So being out there has tremendous benefits. And I think it's important. I think that it's better to increase the probability that you're going to get in the way of information that's going to help your clients and help you than it is to not be out there.
Yeah. what you just said about perplexity is it, because things are changing, right? SEO still matters, Google matters, all these things, but they all play a part. Like you appearing on podcasts, going on YouTube, those transcriptions are crawled by these websites. There's Reddit threads. There's Reddit threads about real estate. Your name pops up. So when people do that search, there you go. That is the new way. And it's not just in one place. It's not just keyword stuffing anymore. It's a combination of all these factors, social media, signaling, and all these different things. And next thing you know, like you said, someone calls up or hears it. It could be someone on your team that listens to it. It understands what your vision is a little bit more. Or it's someone who's listening, who's just out of college and is looking for perhaps an internship, a new job. Maybe their next best salesperson's coming on board. So yeah, all those things play a role.
Yeah, Eric, I had 22 boxes of stuff that for whatever reason I saved over the years. Our old newsletters, old letters, old articles, old advertisements. And I bumped into the first salesperson we ever hired at Massey Knakal was a guy named Ed Winslow. Ed now is an SEO guru. And we took these 22 boxes of stuff I had and created bobknakal.com. We have thousands of pages of stuff on there from my 40-year career. All of it is being SEO'd so that Google can read it, understand it, you see it. And with our new website for the new company, BKREA.com, doing the same thing. We'll get a transcript of this podcast we're doing now, SEO the heck out of it, put it on the website, and somebody says, hey, tell me about the benefit of being out there. Did somebody say it's not who you know, it's who knows you?
Yeah.
This is going to pop up. And so more and more, the world is changing and we have to evolve with it. If you think about it, look at you mentioned the election. So the old school folks go on ABC News and they get 400,000 people looking. That's great. But go on Joe Rogan and you got 40 million people watch. It's unbelievable. The world is different. The world has changed. And you have to constantly, I think I always say you have to keep true to your core values, but you have to constantly be adapting to a changing environment. And the environment is changing. And with the speed at which AI is changing today is remarkable. And we have to change with the times.
Yeah. The data set that you have of 40 years of information that you've been putting out there, that you're now repurposing and putting back out there with the old school tried and true tactics matched with the new one, right? That's what's unbeatable. When you can take that data, and I've seen people say, hey, they've taken all of their thoughts, all of their emails, and there's issues with security, but there's some companies that are hosted on private servers, but that's going to change for everybody, like you just said, very, very soon. All of a sudden, you can put all that in there. It's able to read it. You're able to pick up on your own patterns of what did I do? And you're talking about mistakes before. When did I have this similar decision in the past 40 years and to help me make this decision better? So you can use it for yourself, for self-betterment. You could use it for clients to find you. And yeah, all of that is amazing tools. But when you're thinking about like, you're doing all this work and all of a sudden the flow's coming in, the deal flow's coming in and people are interested. Maybe you go to Vegas. My father-in-law, we talked about this a while ago. He was in the commercial real estate business and he owned his own practice and he was in Buffalo, New York. And he would always joke with me, I remember, because he loved selling, right? He loved sales. He loved conversation. And he would get these deals and he'd get these opportunities. He'd hand it to his people. And sometimes he'd follow up. He'd be like, the phone call was never made. Because people, like you said before, sales sometimes is like this word that they're afraid of it. They're afraid to pick up the phone. They're afraid to do this. They're afraid to sit down with somebody. It always frustrated him. So he would continually do it, but he always had his top people that could get it done, right? Did you ever feel that? Did you ever go through that? I mean, you had small teams, you had large teams, and all of a sudden you have these big deals coming through. You've done all this work. Next thing you know, these people are ready to go, and then you can't get the people to call them. I'm sure you had the people, but you know what I'm getting at?
Yeah, no, I never was reluctant to pick up the phone and call somebody I never spoke to before. And I think that probably came from those early days in my summer jobs in CB, because I was out in the field logging information on every building I saw and who were the tenants, how big was the building. This was for industrial buildings, office buildings, retail properties. And then I'd have to go back to the office and follow up and call people to verify information. And it was something that I never was concerned about, but you have to make the call. Kids today, so used to being on their phones, they could be sitting across the table from each other, they're texting each other rather than talking.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to talk to somebody.
Are you able to see that, help them out, train it, flip it, get them to make the phone call and like change that mindset a little? I mean, because the texting and the Snapchat and all that, that's great, right? Because that's another To your point, you would probably say that's great. Utilize that, but also utilize this phone and utilize the face-to-face.
Yeah, I think that all of the electronic communication is great once you have already established a relationship. But to initiate the relationship, you make the call, try to get the meeting, meet face to face. Face to face communication is the best form of communication. That's why I do so many networking events. I love going out and meeting people. And, you find that that turns out to be a mix of seeing people you may not have seen for a while, and then also meeting some new folks that you can start relationships with.
Yeah. You do all this, right? There's just like this energy and this passion for it. I mean, it comes through clearly in your book and in the conversation we're having today. And anytime you come across you listening to what you have to say, you sold your business for $100 million, right? That's a big change. And you're pretty young when that happened. You're excited about AI now, right? Like it's 2025. It's going to be, time goes fast and you have no stop in you. And people hit success, right? I think Scotty Scheffler was just talking about this. Like you win the golf tournament, you win the Super Bowl, whatever, the Stanley Cup. And great, you celebrate it. And then what happens, right? I saw Jalen Hurts talk about like, where's your Super Bowl ring? And he's like, that was last year. This is this year. I'm moving forward. I'm guessing you're like in that same realm of that's how you think about things. But what is that? Because success doesn't have to be $100 million buyout, right? Success could be closing a big deal. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I feel very, very fortunate because you look at the great athletes, and many of us admire the great athletes that play the variety of sports, but they, by definition, have to stop at some point because the body just can't perform at that high a level anymore. But, for what I do, as long as I can talk and I keep my marbles, I can do this forever. I try to stay in good shape, try to take care of myself. And I always tell people I will absolutely never retire from this. I think this is the coolest business in the world. I absolutely love it. When they put me in the ground, I'll have deals under contract. I'm just going to have to collect the commissions. And, that's just, you find something that you really love. You're so lucky. I feel so lucky to have stumbled into this.
Yeah. Well, I see that with a lot of people I meet from commercial real estate. Like I mentioned, my father-in-law before, unfortunately, he passed away some years ago and he was in hospice and he had deals with him at hospice, right? He was still working on deals and deals were still closing. And, his wife had to finish out some of them, right? But that's real because he had this feeling that you have this and a lot of people have it. Like I said before about the book, like it might not be commercial real estate. It might be something else. But if you have that passion, like you said, someone selling pet supplies, like go for it.
Absolutely.
Resilience, I was thinking a lot about when I was reading your book, because there's all these moments in time. You talked about your mom passed away, I think your junior year. You talk about, you can pick the order, what happened in the 80s, and then you have the .com, and then you have the great financial crisis, and then we have COVID. And these things are all impacted. COVID impacted people differently, but you're in New York City and they're like, yeah, go home. And like you said, go home for 2 weeks and let this thing pass, right? And things change. And you could talk about that too. Like we're still dealing with that, like, vacancies and whatnot. And even so, like 1992, you had no money and other things had taken place. It's all of those things. One is enough to just crater somebody. And you add all those things up over the years, it's like a chilling account of what happened on 9/11, of the way you told that story and running across the street to the deli to make sure people had food to eat so you can bring them back to the office. Like these things are important. That's why I think that book's important to read regardless of what industry that you're in. And I think about resilience a lot, and we talk about it a lot for kids today. How do you deal with it? Because mental health, when you're first starting out, wasn't what it is today. The mental health was a thing, but it's not like, now it's like in vogue to talk about mental health.
Right.
It's very different.
Yeah. Well, I think resilience is that fine line between having belief in yourself, having courage, but at the same time, being able to look brutal truth in the eye and try to have a balance of not being overconfident, but being confident enough to get through tough times. I'm doing a book club thing with my broker coach, Rod, who is my co-author. And we were doing a session today on chapter 3. And we were talking about a lot of those times when we were, getting credit cards to get the money to run the company. And then, the credit cards maxed out and we went to a client for a loan and he wanted half the stock in the business and went to another guy for a loan. He gave us the loan, didn't want the stock. And then we maxed out and then we got lucky to close a deal. And, through all those times, I don't ever remember once thinking, oh, if this doesn't work out, well, I'll go do X or I'll do Y or I'll. There was no looking back. It was like, all right, we're on the island. We set the boat on fire. We're here. We're going to have to make this work. And it was a combination of loving what we did, believing in what we were doing, believing in ourselves, and getting lucky. I will never tell my story without there being elements of luck involved. And I do believe that the harder you work, the luckier you get. But I think we all have to have a little luck in our corner as well.
Yeah. People get afraid of using that word because they think it minimizes the effort that they put into it, right?
Yeah, but there's no way I could not tell my story without mentioning how lucky I was at various points in time.
Yeah, I get that. The market today, I'd brought it up before with COVID, vacancies, things are changing, right? And some notes here in front of me. And, we're taking office buildings and we're turning it into places where people live. And it sounds like that you're on board with. I think there's a lot of things at play there, right? Rezoning, there's politics involved and people are upset and people are happy. There's a lot of noise, right? It's like any other topic. I don't think the noise, what I can tell from watching your stories, I don't think the noise bothers you, right? Like you're not going to get worried. Like if your sports team doesn't do well, you're not going to, like, I don't know, I can't get up today. It's going to be really tough for me. Or if politics don't go your way, you're not going to be like, it's fine, you'll get over it. But the market in and of itself, I mean, you're there, you're in New York City, that's your spot, that's your place. What does it look like? What do you foresee happening here as things change, as people are moving around a lot more?
Yeah, it's really, really interesting. We're in unprecedented times from the perspective of the fact that generally, if the market's going up, everything's going up at the same time, just to different degrees. And if things are going down, all product sectors are going down just to different degrees. For the past couple of years, we've had a market where different product sectors are performing differently. I've never seen that before. So we have a retail sector that's strong. Hotels are on fire. The land market is improving. And, we have a B and C office stock that amazingly still has not reached bottom. Every time we think it's reached bottom, the next week there's another transaction at an even lower price per foot. We have a housing market that is more highly correlated to public policy than it is to supply and demand. And we have a complete disconnect or conflict of interest within our political system where every politician in New York says, oh, we want New York to be more affordable for everybody. But yet every single thing the politicians do, with the exception of the tax abatement for conversion of office to residential, which I'll come back to, except for that, everything that's been done by our policymakers has constricted supply and made housing costs more expensive for everybody for the simple reason that housing supply brings new people into districts that don't know the politicians and might not vote for them, and nobody could dissuade me that that's not the fact. And so that's the hypocrisy we have from our policymakers, is that they say, oh, we want it to be more affordable, but yet everything they do makes it less affordable. And as I said, with the exception of the 467M tax abatement program, which is extraordinarily compelling, it's working. I've always said if the policymakers can come up with policy that motivates the private sector will do anything you want them to do. And so this program is awesome. There are currently 57 office properties that are being converted to residential. It's almost 23 million square feet of space is being converted from office to residential. That's great. And there's going to be tens of millions of more feet done because this incentive is very well directed and is very compelling. We need more of that. I think our political system should be completely changed, but we could talk about that for hours.
Yeah. So are you doing deals with a whole new host of people because you're selling, I don't know, are you selling buildings to the residential side of the developers over there that are going to then outfit these offices to become residential?
Yeah, well, interestingly, Eric, it's the same group of folks. I sell a lot of ground up development sites, but the same developers that will do ground up will also convert a building from one use to another. And this is nothing new. This has been going on forever. As long as I've been in the business, and I like to tell the story of 141 East 45th Street, which was a building that was built in the 30s or 40s as an apartment building. In the 1950s, it was converted to an office building. I sold it in the 1990s for conversion to a hotel. And now the hotel owner is thinking about selling it, and it'll be converted to condominiums. So these is constantly evolution based on what highest and best use happens to be. But there is an abundance of these conversions happening now for two reasons. One, we have way too much office space in New York, and a majority of it is functionally obsolete. The average office building in New York City is probably over 80 years old at this point, and impossible to convert an older building into an office that could compete with new construction. No matter how much money you put into a building, you can't change ceiling heights and you can't take columns out. So you're never going to really be able to compete with the new stuff. And we have a desperate condition within our housing market. We have probably now a 1% vacancy rate. So there is a need to convert this functionally obsolete, mostly vacant office stock into apartments, and the tax abatement is a good one. And so a lot of it is happening.
Yeah, and make it affordable for people to live there, right? Did you see this playing out? Like when the offices, was this something that people noticed, like, wait, we're going to have a problem on our hands because there's too much office space? Or at that time, was it impossible to see?
Yeah, no, I think it was very clear. I talked way before the 467M came about. I was advocating for a form of tax abatement called 421G. 421G was a tax abatement program that was present down in the financial district. Many people think it was implemented after 9/11 to revitalize downtown, but it actually was around well before 2001. It just so happened that 9/11 was the perfect time for folks to take advantage of it downtown. And so on 9/11, there were about 1,800 dwelling units in the financial district. There are almost 30,000 down there today. And most of that precipitated by this 421G tax abatement. And so I said, after the pandemic, I said, hey, bring back the 421G and make it citywide. And they created a 467M, which is even more robust than the 421G program was, but it's citywide and it's a great program and it's producing great results.
I don't know if you could look into this, and we don't know what's going to happen. And this is the type of podcast episode that people can listen to long after it's done. But that said, mayoral race is happening. There's a lot of conversation, obviously New York City, and that city dictates a lot of what's going to happen around the country. Does that change stuff? Are you concerned about it? I mean, obviously, again, you've seen a lot bigger things happen, so I don't think it's going to disrupt what you do and what your business is doing, but the market as a whole, any concerns there?
No, look, we've lived through all kinds of cycles, and New York is always going to pull through. I always say never bet against New York. We may go through a tough time. If Mamdani wins the election, we could be in for a tough time. I think from a real estate perspective, the sector that's most likely to be negatively impacted is the rent-regulated housing sector, which already has gotten, it got kicked in the stomach when the new rent laws went into effect in June of 2019. That was called HSTPA, the Housing Stabilization and Tenant Protection Act, but then got, another punch to the gut during COVID. And now, to the extent that Mamdani wins and implements the 4-year rent freeze that he is talking about, which is one of the few things that he talks about that he actually could do. Most of what he talks about with respect to his thoughts and policies would have to be implemented by the state legislature, not the mayor of New York. So he can't do a lot of what he talks about, but he could negatively impact the rent-regulated housing market again. And then, of course, everybody's concerned about crime. If you got rid of the New York police force and put a bunch of social workers out in the street begging people not to do bad things, I don't think that's going to work too well. And when you have a guy who says that he doesn't really understand the purpose of jails, you got somebody who could do some pretty wacky stuff.
Yeah. I see that. Have you looked at I think in the past, you at one point you were thinking like, what if we go to Chicago, right? Like, what if we open up an office there? And is that something, obviously you're attuned to what's going on in the world market, the other cities and whatnot. Are you actively doing business there? Do you consider it? Do you think about it? What does that look like?
Yeah, no, that was you talking about probably in the book I mentioned in different inflection points over the course of Massey Knakal. We started as a Manhattan company and we had a territory system where we put one broker in each neighborhood, let them become market experts in that neighborhood. And when we filled up all the territories in Manhattan, we said, okay, what do we do now? We were just selling buildings. Do we lease office space? Do we try to get mortgages for people? And we said, look, we don't know anything about those lines of business. We know how to sell buildings. Let's go open up an office in Queens. And then let's open up an office in Brooklyn. And let's go work in the Bronx. And we did this long before it was cool to go to the outer boroughs. Now it's super cool to be in Brooklyn. We went to Brooklyn when most Manhattan brokers thought that, hey, if I go across the river, my shoes are going to get filthy. I'm not going to go do that. But we had boots on the ground and established relationships long before it became cool. And then when we filled up all the territories in New York City, we said, again, what do we do? Do we go for the geographic expansion and go to Boston, Philly, Boston, DC, Chicago? Or do we offer more services for people? And at that point in time, we made the different decision and said, hey, if we go to Chicago, we're going to have to explain who we are and what we can do. And we had relationships with clients that were decades long in New York. Let's just offer them more services. And we got into retail leasing, we got into mortgage brokerage. And, that was a good decision there. And then, during the pandemic, a lot of New York City brokers started doing deals around the country, particularly in Florida, Texas, Tennessee. If you look at where all the action was, it was in the low income tax states. Generally, states with less than 3% income tax had tremendous population growth, economic growth, good dynamics within the real estate sectors. And the states with more than 3% state income tax had the reverse. But I wasn't tempted. I was maybe a little tempted to go out of New York, but I just said, you know what? I don't know anything about these markets. I think we're having a level of expertise in a certain area. I just didn't feel comfortable going outside. I'm putting all my chips into the middle of the table on New York and, did my famous walking tour of Manhattan. I spent 220 hours out in the field walking every block of Manhattan, south of 96th Street and south of 110th Street to create the map. That's the focal point of the Knakal Map Room. And I just said, you know what? I love this city. Never bet against this city. I'm staying here. I'm not going to be tempted to go elsewhere and just, continue to try to help as many clients as I can in New York.
Yeah. The map room is this, like, we think of maps, like today, everything's so changed. And you talked about AI before, and you're combining like the future with the analog room, right? And it's not just an analog room. It's not just maps. It's like you just said, like you actually have walked these streets and gotten a perspective of it that no one else has. And that's why they want to run these, like the features they want to do. The New York Times feature, like, we have to see this. Your clients come in there. It sounds like when they see that, the people that want to connect with you, that could be the tipping point, right? That's why we want to work with him and his team.
Yeah, Eric, it was by far and away the best thing I had ever done, walking the city. The pandemic created a perfect time to do it. And I'll tell you, I wish I did it 30 years earlier because it really was enlightening. I saw the city from a different perspective than I had ever seen it before. And it created something that truly is unique. I mean, over the course of my career, I've given over 10,000 marketing pitches to get hired. And I've won 26% of the pitches I've given over the course of my career. In the map room, we just had a presentation this morning. The owner agreed to hire us. That will be 51 wins out of 52 pitches in that room. And it's just because you walk in there and it's overwhelmingly obvious that we know more about the land and development market in New York City than anyone else. And so it's the old analog system combined with the AI that we're applying to everything has created a very formidable platform.
So there's two things you also said in there. You said 26%. So it's like, we're not hitting 100%. Like you're having amazing success. You're obviously not winning all the deals. And then you go 51 of 52. What happened on the 52? the missing number.
They came in, we got to the party late. They had already mentally committed to another firm, and we did our best, and I followed up for a couple of months afterwards. They made the decision they were sticking with the firm they were originally going to go with, and it kills me, but I knew it was going to happen at some point.
Yeah, it keeps you going though. What you said about we're doing it long before it became cool. And I think you were doing a lot of these things and you have to have this confidence in it because you know people are going to talk, right? I've heard stories. My dad had a dental practice and they started taking dental insurance and people were talking. Why would you do that? You shouldn't do that. This is a terrible idea. And you're out there. And I think I mentioned this before. You're putting signs out on commercial real estate. No one had ever done that before in your city. Like, I guess again, maybe it just goes back to the simple answer of like, I don't care what people think. I know this is the answer, but you also aren't always doing it right. Cause like you just said a second ago, like, I wish I had done the map room, the walk in New York City 30 years ago. So it's not like you're always getting it right. But when you do get it right, like you got a lot of confidence in it and you're not listening to all the chatter out there.
Yeah, we did some things that were a little atypical. I remember we put a sign up on our first building that we were selling and had a client call up and say, "Hey, Bob, I saw this sign on your building on 55th Street. Why'd you put that sign up there?" I said, "Because we want people to know we're selling the building." He said, "Get that sign down. I want to buy the building. I don't want everybody to know it's for sale." And we said, "Oh, this must be a good idea." You remember the first mailing we did to the brokerage community with a flyer on the building we were selling. And, people were shocked that we were proactively willing to cooperate with them and split our fee 50-50. And, you look at the sign, you look at the proactively reaching out to the brokerage community, the way we did everything, it was things that were in the seller's best interest. These were like no-brainers to us. I mean, how are we going to get a better price? By hiding the fact the building's for sale? How are we going to get a better price? By not interacting with the thousands of brokers that are active selling buildings in New York? I mean, these were they were not difficult decisions.
Yeah. And you knew to do it. Is that where the decision comes in? And kind of ending up, we're kind of a little bit where we started with the podcasting and this, but also then creating your own show. Like you're doing YouTube videos, you're on LinkedIn quite a bit, you're sharing this content. Then the idea comes, it's like, okay, wait, what if we had the Bob Knakal Show, right? And that's when we started working together. And we're going to, bring people in the map room. We're going to have a live auditorium, live audiences, and we're going to interview some of the commercial real estate titans of New York City. That's something different. Again, I know it goes back to the conversation you had before. Bob's just doing it because he's egotistical and he just wants to be out there and all that. Obviously, there's more to it. But again, you're launching yourself into this thing to say, hey, and it takes time, right? Like as we talked about before, it takes time. It takes a lot of energy. I mean, just having a conversation with someone like this, you got to be on. There's a microphone. It's being recorded. There's an aspect that's exciting and it gives you a rush, but it's also a little bit draining, right? You're using your energy up. Is that where, like, again, this thing came to you to say, hey, I don't know what's going to happen with it. I'm not really thinking about the outcome of it. Maybe it becomes a Netflix series one day. That would be awesome. But at the same time, it's like, hey, we're going to go push forward and we're going to do this thing and we're going to see where the chips fall.
Yeah, I mean, it was really prompted by Sam Zell's death. Sam was a larger-than-life real estate titan. And, I'm a member at the Wharton School, has a real estate center called the Zell-Lurie Real Estate Center. I've been a research sponsor there for a long time. And Sam would talk at conferences quite a bit, talked at our real estate center often, but never really did a lot of podcasts. I don't know that he ever did one. And I think it's such a shame that I don't know that there are recordings of him sharing his wisdom. And I said, you know what? A lot of old timers have a lot of great stories to tell and their stories should be heard. And so I thought, hey, what the heck? Let's do it. Try to do it with a twist, with a live studio audience and do it a little different. But it's been fun. And as you probably could tell, I could talk about real estate every day, all day. So it is absolutely fun for me, and I have some good friends and guests on the show, and it's been we just started, but it's been great.
Yeah. Well, and like you just said it, like you're doing it, obviously it's going to help out. You don't know what could come from it, right? It's like this black swan event almost. Like you get a phone call, you're like, who is this person? How did they find me? And then they do find you. But you're also giving back, right? Like you just said, you're sharing these stories, and you're so right. Like I know I've brought up different members of my family in this conversation, but it's just kind of kept on hitting me. My grandfather was in the real estate business. and he would travel and he would get all of these speeches, and there's so few of them recorded, but the one or the two that you have recorded become just gold, right? You just want to hold onto those forever. And now we can do more with it with AI and all that. But like, imagine if there was 100 of those, like you just said. Oh my God, like that's what we need. And these stories matter. And these, like you said at the very beginning of the show, like the mentorship, if we could have just learned from them, and maybe it's not what they're doing today, but you can relate to that story that you had about your line of credit in 92 or whatever that might have been. Like you can apply it to what's going on, to something in your life and your business today. And I think that matters. And then allowing these people to have a voice to come out there and speak, I think it's a really big deal. So I think it's awesome that you're not only that you're doing that, but you're showing up on other shows as well and giving other people an opportunity to learn from you in a exclusive type of conversation like this. So
Yeah, and to also let people know who may be going through a tough time that, hey, you know what? That happens to everybody. You're not alone. I ran a company on credit cards for 3 or 4 years. I ran my personal life on credit cards for 10 years. From 1988 to 1998, my net worth fluctuated between 0 and minus $180,000 because I had $180,000 of credit cards. Now, that was my life. It's tough. This is a grind, but you have to believe in yourself. You got to keep going. And if you're doing fundamentally the right things and you keep doing them over and over and over again, eventually it will work.
what were your interest rates on those credit cards then?
Oh, gosh. They probably were. It wasn't at the peak. The worst interest rate environment was like 79, 80 when rates were 18, 20%. But they were probably in the low double digits, 12, 13, 14% at the time, maybe higher. I don't remember.
Yeah, it's tough. Yeah, I mean, you look around and you see, hey, Bob Knakal, he's out there, commercial real estate, he's killing it. Everything's going great all the time. Like, and then you just realize, like, you have these conversations, like, to go through it and to like, and you being just real about it in your book. I think that matters. That's the type of stuff that people can read no matter what industry they're in.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I've always been conscious of is not sugarcoating anything. I've always kind of told it as it was. The good, the bad, and the ugly. It happens to all of us, and it is what it is. But if the stories I tell and what I put out there inspires somebody or changes the way they do things or makes them a little more successful, then that feels really great. I've been fortunate that I've had a lot of things that have gone my way in my career, but the legacy that I'm proudest of by far is that today in the New York City investment sales world in New York, there are 32 companies or divisions of companies that are either owned by or run by people that learn the business at Massey Knakal. And, today I have a bunch of really sharp, young, hardworking folks that are in my new company. And, I'm hoping someday they go out and they start their own business or they go out and run their own division somewhere. And to know that you had even a small part in helping someone profoundly change their life for the better is a very, very rewarding thing.
Yeah, it's like a coaching tree, right? In the commercial real estate business. I remember when we learned about you and this is what you're looking to do, we're always looking up our clients. Who are they? What's their industry? Okay, they're in commercial real estate. There's a lot going on in that industry. They're in New York City. Okay, we got to dive deeper into this. You start going to Reddit threads. And I got to tell you, Bob, like it was one of my greatest mentors, like comments like that over and over and over again. And I was like, wow, this is inspiring. This is exciting. We want to be a part of this. Like I said, we can't do the type of work we do for everybody, but we can do it for a lot of people. We just want to make sure we're doing it for the right people. And so when you can go out there and you can look around and find that information, and now you can go dive in deeper with LinkedIn and podcasts and things like that. I mean, it's amazing. You keep doing it. I know you're getting up very early in the morning, coming from where you live to coming to New York City and every day. What time did you get up today?
I get up 5 o'clock every morning.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Usually have a cup of coffee, watch the news, in the gym at 5:30, work out till about 6:15, cool down for a few minutes, and then shower, get to the train, and get in to let the action start.
Yeah, I love it. Well, Bob, I appreciate it. Like I said, the book, Selling Buildings, I got it right here. It's for anybody. Obviously, if you're thinking about commercial real estate, obviously an incredible industry. I've known a lot of people have been in it. Obviously, you test to that, but it's not just for that. It's for anybody who's just interested business. I don't know if you're in college, like we have a lot of people who are college, post-college, and they're like aspiring to be type of people. these are the types of books that I think people could be reading and content to be listening to. So, but thank you again for everything and always sharing your story. I appreciate it.
You got it, Eric. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for listening to Entrepreneur Perspectives. This show is produced by Quiet Loud Studios, where we create podcast writing and original media. Learn more at quietloudstudios.com.